the summer of 1995 cast a shadow over Europe that would never be erased. In the small Bosnian town of Srebrenica, declared a safe area by the United Nations, thousands of men and boys sought refuge from the war that had torn through the Balkans. They believed the blue helmets of the UN would shield them. They believed the world was watching. But in July of that year, the illusion of safety shattered into a nightmare. When Bosnian Serb forces under General Ratko Mladic stormed Srebrenica, they separated the men from the women, fathers from daughters, brothers from sisters. In just a matter of days, more than 8,000 Muslim men and boys were executed, shot in fields, warehouses, and forests. Their bodies were bulldozed into mass graves, hidden beneath layers of earth. It was the single worst massacre in Europe since the Second World War. For the women left behind, the mothers, wives, and daughters, the pain was unbearable. They had watched their loved ones led away, powerless to stop the tide of violence. And when the silence fell over Srebrenica, they were left with nothing but grief, unanswered questions, and the hollow echoes of promises broken by the international community. But grief can transform. From that silence, a voice began to rise. It was the voice of the Mothers of Srebrenica, an association of survivors who refused to allow the world to forget. These women, many of whom had lost every male relative they had, were driven not only by mourning but by a fierce demand for truth and justice. At first, their cries were drowned in political denial. Many in power sought to minimize what had happened, to bury the massacre beneath diplomacy and fragile peace agreements. But the mothers would not allow erasure. They began to march, to protest, to gather outside courthouses and government buildings. Their presence itself became a haunting reminder. Women clothed in black, holding photographs of husbands and sons whose faces would never grow older. Their conflict was not only against those who had pulled the triggers, but also against a world that had failed to protect them. They challenged the United Nations, the Dutch peacekeepers, and the governments who had stood by as the slaughter unfolded. Their demand was simple but relentless. Acknowledge what happened, punish those responsible, and honor the memory of the dead. In the years immediately following the war, their struggle seemed insurmountable. Justice was slow, buried beneath layers of politics, bureaucracy, and indifference. Yet the Mothers of Srebrenica refused to disappear. They traveled across Europe, bringing their story to parliaments and human rights conferences. Their voices, once dismissed as whispers of grief, grew into a roar that forced the world to listen. Their extraordinary courage lay not in weapons or armies, but in their refusal to surrender. To silence, and in that refusal, they began to change the course of history. The dawn of the new millennium brought with it a fragile hope. International courts were beginning to prosecute war crimes committed in the Balkans. The Mothers of Srebrenica were at the front lines of this legal battle, pushing relentlessly for accountability. They were not satisfied with symbolic gestures. They wanted names, faces, and verdicts. Their motivation was not only personal loss, but the determination that the world would recognize Srebrenica for what it was: genocide. This was not merely a fight for their families, it was a fight for history itself, for the truth to be written in a way that no denial could erase. In 2001, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia convicted General Radislav Krstić of genocide for his role in Srebrenica. It was a historic moment. For the first time in European history, genocide was legally recognized on the continent since the Holocaust. And yet, for the mothers, the verdict was only a beginning. Too many perpetrators still walked free. Too many governments still shifted blame. Their struggle expanded beyond the perpetrators of the massacre to the institutions that had failed them. In 2007, they filed a lawsuit against the United Nations itself, accusing it of negligence in failing to protect Srebrenica. Though the case was dismissed on grounds of diplomatic immunity, it forced the world to confront uncomfortable questions. What good are international promises if they cannot protect the most vulnerable? What value do safe zones hold when they can be overrun in a matter of days? In 2019, after years of tireless effort, the Mothers of Srebrenica won a partial legal victory in the Netherlands. The Dutch Supreme Court ruled that Dutch peacekeepers bore limited responsibility for the deaths of some of the men expelled from their compound. It was not the sweeping justice the mothers had hoped for, but it was an acknowledgement, a crack in the wall of denial. The outcome of their decades-long fight has been bittersweet. Some justice has been served. Leaders like Radovan Karadzic and Ratko Mladic have been convicted of genocide and crimes against humanity. The massacre is now officially recognized in the history books, yet no courtroom verdict can return the sons, husbands, and fathers who were lost. For the mothers, the empty chairs at their tables will never be filled. And still, they march. Every July, they gather in Srebrenica to bury newly identified remains, unearthed from mass graves and identified through painstaking DNA analysis. The funerals never seem to end, but neither does their determination. The legacy of the Mothers of Srebrenica lies not only in the verdicts they help secure, but in the moral questions they force us to confront. What does justice mean when it comes too late? Can truth ever heal wounds carved so deep? And perhaps most haunting of all, what responsibility does the world carry to ensure that never again is more than just words? The Mothers of Srebrenica stand as a testament to the strength of human resilience. Their story is not one of passive victimhood, but of relentless courage. They took their pain and forged it into a weapon sharper than any sword, the truth. And by demanding the world to look at what happened in Srebrenica, they ensured that history could not look away. Their march continues, echoing a lesson that transcends time and borders, that silence in the face of injustice is complicity, and that memory itself is a form of resistance.